I was born in Swindon, which is where I grew up with my mum, who's from Sri Lanka, and my dad, who's from India. And I have two older brothers, and there's 2 years in between us all. Well, I was the youngest, so I guess it meant that I was always copying what they were doing and also learning off them. But I guess also being the youngest meant that I couldn't always join in. I guess that is a part of why I did often play on my own. As a young child, I was ahead in speaking and reading and things like that. I was socially behind. I didn't realise that I had like heightened anxiety until I was an adult and the therapist mentioned it to me. But I thought that that was what everyone experienced every day. Creative things I seem to understand. In fact, I've only just really very recently realised this, but I don't process in a very like story-like or linear way. So I think of these moments and these like sort of bubbles of things that I engage with in a very like internally physical way. But that's just how I process in general. That's why a lot of my memories are less sort of social story memories, but more sensory, like kind of things. And then I piece them together afterwards. Well, if my 10-year-old self had seen someone like me, then my 10-year-old self would have been able to be me sooner. Even when I got to the point of being diagnosed, I was only getting a diagnosis to get support with my studies, but it was very much, it wasn't me I wasn't really thinking in a sense of trying to be more comfortable with myself. I was very much trying to get support, and I wasn't thinking from an identity point of view. I didn't even tell anyone, and I didn't even plan on talking about it or anything with anyone. So it's a responsibility for me for my 10-year-old self, not only my 10-year-old self, but 10-year-old not me's as well. Pablo likes ice cream spoons because they're nice to hold. They sometimes come in really nice colours. They're smooth. For him, they hold the memory of the experience. So he might have had ice cream in the park, and then he might have been playing with the ice cream spoons, and then all of these sparkly like feelings that he's had, he sort of puts them into the objects that he's carrying, and then the next day that spoon might remind him of those sparkly feelings. I process and think a lot through object attachments, so I have very similar things with whatever it is that I've been holding that day, if it's an ice cream spoon or a conker or a leaf or whatever it is, and those good feelings and sparkly moments being put onto an object, they can sort of remind you of those feelings at times where you least expect it. So if I've kept something that is full of that good energy, I could find that thing in my bag one day, and that could just immediately, without me even seeking that, it immediately offers me that energy back. And that's quite like, it can be quite transformative. And as an adult, I just feel that if I can carry something and it can change how I feel and how I am, then I don't really mind if someone else thinks that's socially unacceptable. And it might make other autistic people feel less awkward. By being, you give other people permission to be. So those little moments where I decide to not mask, and those little moments where I decide to not repress myself in public when I'm around people, that gives other people, like children and adults, permission to be as well. The more autistic adults that stop unmasking and normalise things like stimming, the less judgment there'll be, and the freer people will be to just not have to put all of this energy into hiding who they are. Box of Buttons was sort of, well, it was a translation of my own experience looking at my mum's sewing box of buttons, and I used to sit on the floor looking at them and tip them out, and there's just all sorts of nice games that you can play. You can find ones that match, or you can find ones that are the same colour, or like they make a really good sound if you tip them out and put them back in the tin. It's sort of about how I relate to objects as well. And with the buttons, it's sort of like it would be, I'd come across a button where I remembered really strongly the item of clothing that it came from, and I would then remember some of the places that I went wearing that clothing. It would just all come rushing back. As a child, you end up building up all of these like unresolved needs, or like you learn things, and those situations just like you emotionally learn things and patterns, and those situations will like replay and like they'll keep replaying through your life. And to be able to stop and look through it yourself, and realize, oh, like that wasn't me being rude in that situation, that wasn't my fault in that situation. It was actually really difficult, and like to be able to get a chance to stop and sort of resolve those things. I feel like every time I write on a Pablo story that acknowledges one of those difficulties and shows it to people that might not be able to see that from the inside. Yeah, it's interesting to sort of think about if the show had been on when I was younger, would things have been different? And I think, yeah, things probably would have, but then they're different now because of it. So, yeah.
Mum to make her shitey face.
It's Pablo thinking through his internal language, because he doesn't quite know how to communicate what's going on, and he's sort of self-managing a lot in each episode. That sometimes involves a lot of contradicting thoughts, like for example with Tang and Draff wanting to do different things, and sort of him understanding what he wants to do, what he can do, what the rules are. When you have things that are teaching you things from the outside, they're sort of telling you like, this is what you're meant to think and this is how you're supposed to be. And so it would have been Pablo sort of being quite robotic in presenting how he is. Because it's from the inside, you get all of the chaos that happens inside, and you get to put that on a screen. And he doesn't know what he wants straight away because it's confusing, and he doesn't know. Sometimes he doesn't know the words for how he feels. Sometimes he feels scribbly or blur, or it's a translation process through his art world. And while he's not verbal in the outer world, he can still, by getting a sense of how he feels, he can still translate in some way how he feels through some form of communication, or other people can reach in. And by watching Pablo, other people can sort of reach in and consider things that maybe they might not have considered before. I think that the way that I thought as a child, in many ways, is very much the same way that I think now. I mean, people call it childlike imagination, but why is it that? Why isn't it just imagination? I don't really understand. But maybe one day I'll wake up as an adult, outer adult, inner adult. Yeah, maybe it'll be like outer child, inner adult. We'll switch. I don't know.